Hello and welcome to today's WIEF Power Talk webinar on digital banking, driving financial inclusion for MSMEs. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce our moderator for today. She is a renowned speaker, broadcast journalist, and an author. She has conducted over 5,000 interviews and some prominent names, including the former Prime Minister of Finland. At Malaysian radio station BFM, she hosts enterprises that covers topics on the startup scene, personal development, technology to organizational development, and her vantage that showcase women of leadership and influence. Now, Frida has written 6 books and is planning to write more in the future. Now, without further ado, let's welcome our moderator, Frida Liu.
Thank you, and good morning or good evening, wherever you're joining us. So thank you for the introduction. I didn't know about plans to write more books, but yeah, I'll keep that in mind. Now, with what has been happening the last 2 years, the nation in Malaysia is pursuing a national recovery plan, and Malaysia's goal for the digital economy to contribute 22.6% GDP as outlined in the Malaysia Digital Economy Blueprint that was launched in February 2021. No one should be left behind, and the micro SMEs need to be playing on a level playing field. Bank Negara is set to issue up to 5 licenses to conduct digital banking business or Islamic digital banking business by the first quarter of next year, following the release of the digital banking framework on December 31st, 2020. Now, digital banking will accelerate the growth of Malaysia's economy from the pandemic to become a more equitable and sustainable economy, enabling existing firms and entrepreneurs to serve markets that are currently underserved, lowering costs and increasing efficiency for existing firms and entrepreneurs to become more competitive and allowing for the creation of new forms of business. I'm very happy to have with me experts and special guests, and let me introduce them one by one. First, the rows in the room, Yeoh, Head of Financial Risk Management and Fintech Digital Banking Leader, KPMG in Malaysia. We have Alain, Head of ShopeePay Malaysia, and Professor Dr. Nafis Alim, Head School of Business at Monash University and Research Affiliate at the University of Cambridge. So hello everyone, and good to see you all here. My first question is to Professor. I want to know about the economic impact if the underserved communities, such as the micro SMEs, has greater participation in the digital economy. What would that picture look like, Professor?
Thank you for having me, Freda, and good morning, everyone, and good afternoon and evening if you're in different time zone. This is a very important question to be discussed. I want to share some background, Freda, first. SME plays a very important role in any economy, but if you look from Malaysian perspective, it's one of the most important pillar of the Malaysian economy. If we look into the statistical figure over the few years, in fact, for the last 2 decades, on average, SMEs contribute around 38 to 40% of Malaysian GDP. And among that, the service and manufacturing sector has always remained the driver of SMEs GDP. And these two inclusive bring 80% of that 40%. So you can see that around 30% of GDP is coming from the services and manufacturing sector. But unfortunately, what's happening now that because of the pandemic, for the first time in 17 years, the SME GDP registered a negative 7.3%. And these data I'm talking about coming from the Department of Statistics, which we are talking about for 2020 data, because 2021 data will be only available next year. But we can already see that the impact is overwhelming in that sense. The contribution is going down. And one of the reason is because many of these SMEs has lost their market. They would have been catering to the sectors or to the industries which were flourishing in the normal time, and because of the pandemic, because of the people not working, people working from home, for example, less opportunities to go out and buy things, these have been closing down. So that's one aspect of the negative thing what is happening because of the pandemic and how much importance of SME there. The another area or dimension to look at is the employment opportunities created by the SMEs. And again, if I look into the statistical figure for that, SMEs have always been contributing almost close to 50% of the employment in the Malaysian. I'm talking about every people will be employed there. And even that particular figure has dropped last year, 2020 statistic that has come down to around 48% in that sense. So we can already see 2% drop. And if you just look into the numbers, that the official number is around 65,000 to 70,000 per person compared to 2019 of 7.32 million. So it's a huge number drop, I can say there. And this is going to continue because, again, I was reading a recent article, in fact, yesterday, talking about the consumer group, which says that more people are going to fall into this vulnerable category or losing jobs or having any means of income next year when the government subsidy is going to go down. So we are looking at a very overall, importance of the SME in the economy. At the same time, we can see that how much turbulence it is bringing by the COVID, the pandemic, and how it's going to impact the overall Malaysian economy aspiration. Yeah, Freda?
Right. Okay. So thank you. And of course, I work for an organization which will fall under the SME category as well. A question here for Zinyi, right? What are the constraints micro SMEs face to participate in the digital economy?
Thanks, Freda, and also thank you again to WIEF to have me here. I think Prof explained about the contributions of SMEs. Just like to explain a little bit more about what we really mean by MSMEs, right? So MSMEs in Malaysia, they make up the 78% of the total SME population. And these are, that kind of translates to 900,000 of MSMEs, okay? And these are companies have less than 5 employees and an annual turnaround of 300,000. Okay, so you can imagine the scale. They're small, right? They're small businesses. So given this backdrop, a lot more effort would go into them running the businesses and developing the products and the actual activity of selling, right? So many MSMEs are still less competitive when it comes to processes and operations. Because of the lack of their skilled talent and limited access to funding and low adoption of technology, right? So to understand why is there a low adoption of technology, then we need to appreciate that there is a lack of awareness. There's a high cost of adoption and obviously lack of skills related to the use of digital technology. And it's really a cycle, right? If you think about it, you have a lack of knowledge, then you lack of adoption, and then you fall behind in the digital economy and it becomes just more difficult to pick up. So this is why you see a lot of efforts by various organizations, whether it's telcos, financial institutions, government agencies, and e-commerce platforms as well. They're providing MSMEs with as many tools as possible, right, to bring them on board the digital economy. And I think that this is really crucial because this really helps them to come on. And we keep talking about digitization, right? So it's very important. Then you can bring the MSMEs on board digital economy.
Right. Okay. At the very simplest level, I know, like, for example, when I buy my nasi lemak, I can do a pay, at the very simplest level, right? Alain, we've read stories of people with disabilities, right? Youth and women who have succeeded as sellers on the Shopee platform. So it does sound like a vibrant e-commerce platform. There's a lot of potential to create economic inclusiveness. Can you tell us a little bit more about this, Alain?
Sure. Thank you so much, Freda. And very good morning to my fellow panelists, Ms. Yeoh, Professor Dr. Nafis Alam, both of whom I'm honored to be sharing this stage with. So to address your question, Freda, since the inception in 2015, Shopee's mission has always been to better the lives of communities it serves through technology. This includes empowering and digitalizing local micro SMEs and SMEs, and also helping them succeed online. To begin, what Shopee did was to create a user-friendly interface which replicates the social selling experience. So basically, it takes up to about 30 seconds to set up a Shopee store. Listing up a product is as simple as uploading a picture on Instagram. Right. And since Shopee is a mobile-focused platform, all you need essentially is a smartphone to do all of these. So this is part of a holistic ecosystem, which includes integrated payment and logistics solutions, as well as marketing and operational support to bring traffic to our platform that will benefit the sellers. So we're basically matching users or customers and sellers. We've also invested in ensuring that all our sellers have the support that they need to succeed. Hence, which is why we run about 50 classes a month via our free e-commerce workshop. called Shopee University. The modules are comprehensive, covering everything from how to set up your store to writing a good product description, how to take good photos and videos to promote your product, customer service, and how to grow sales via advertising. And importantly, also the workshops that we conduct in 3 languages online, English, BM, and Chinese. So it's so easy that you can be out of your home when you receive an order, you can be out of your home and you can still receive an order and also reply to customer queries within the app. You can be anywhere to join the Shopee University workshop and still be able to upskill your abilities. The convenience of doing an online business on Shopee has offered a variety of new possibilities. The access to digital know-how, awareness, and trends to anyone who wants to be part of the digital economy, especially during a time where digitalization has become more prevalent than ever. So I'll share one example to put into perspective. One story that has really inspired myself and the other colleagues here in Shopee. One of our sellers, Zida Aziz, she lost her limb due to cancer and had no prior business experience. Last year during the pandemic, she decided to try out selling on the platform. Because the platform is so easy to navigate and everything is fully integrated, she didn't really have to worry too much about the periphery, focusing more on her core product. When an order comes in, she can easily print the airway bill from the Shopee Seller Center, paste it on her parcel, and then it's as easy as that, it's ready to be shipped. As a result, today, she records a 4-figure daily revenue. Wow. And what she's selling is dried seafood, like ikan bilis. And what she's managed to do is also employ additional staff members to help her grow her business.
Right.
I'll share a second example. Encik Ghazali, who's a retiree who started his business during MCO last year, together with his wife, selling items such as crispy biragot, sambal pecel that they made from scratch in their kitchen. As an entrepreneur, he's involved in every stage of the business, from buying ingredients from small-time farmers in Sabah Bernam to cooking, to marketing, packing the products for delivery. And very recently, they hit the 30,000 monthly revenue point, just selling on Shopee.
Right.
And today they're processing about 60 kilograms worth of ingredients every single day in their home kitchen. To cope with this increasing demand, what they've done also is to hire 2 additional employees to help with the cooking. He's also training his children to help handle marketing and packaging. So it's a full family affair here.
Right.
Encik Ghazali is also giving back to society, as I mentioned before, by buying local ingredients at a sustainable price to support the small-time farmers in Sabah Bernam. So you can see how this is trickling down to the wider economy. Right. So it is stories like this that remind us that the work that we do here brings meaning to the lives of others and those around them. And we're proud to be able to build this foundation that makes it easy for anyone who wants to be a seller, including and particularly the underserved communities in Malaysia.
Right. I'm listening to this and I'm thinking now that, with him hiring more people, he now falls out of the MSME because he's got more than 5 people under him, right? And I've tried it before. And what's also interesting, you were talking about that lady who's handicapped, right? And she's earning 4 figures a day. So that's pretty, encouraging. Prof, when you listen to this, how important is e-commerce and e-wallets in helping micro SMEs to participate in the digital economy, and how does digital banking further this goal?
Thank you, Freda. But before I go into that, I really want to thank Alain and his team, the good work they are doing by bringing this inclusion, because with this type of support provided by the platform like Shopee is really helping to rebuild those income generation for the underprivileged community, at the same time to also provide job opportunities. So very good work done by the Alain and his team. Coming back to it, there are 2 aspects of your question, Freda. One is talking about the digitization, right? And I think you mentioned earlier that now when you are going to buy your nasi lemak from the shop, so you can even scan your wallet and you can pay through that. Even though we have gone through all these challenges in the last 2 years due to pandemic, but one good thing what we have seen that how quickly we adopt to the changes. Overnight we can see all these small shops selling things on the roadside, small stalls. They will be having their own wallet. You can just scan and pay. Cashless trend became a norm, even though people were scared to dealing with the physical cash. There was also some reports talking about that the physical cash can carry some bacteria and people will be infected. So there was a hesitance and everybody wanted to go into cashless. So the good thing was to look into all these SMEs and these small operators to go into digital thing and they start using the wallet. So it gives the confidence to the consumer like us, as you mentioned, Freda, that you can do that. At the same time, it provides them an opportunity because if you look into even the bank operation these days, ATM might have a longer queue, for example, or banks might be having restricted hours, and everybody went on to that. Even Malaysian government pushed that with the first of their payout was in the form of 100 ringgit e-wallet payment, and everybody went on to the bandwagon and started downloading the popular e-wallet like Touch and Go, Boost, and so on. So it is a combination of both from the consumer as well as from the supplier perspective. The supplier in the sense that the provider of the services and the food this thing. So it's all about the digital literacy, and I'm very much impressed to see that many of these people picked up on their own, and some support given by their platform like Shopee helped them to pick up those aspiration of digital literacy using the digital wallet and so on. The second thing which your question asked about how digital banking, we all understand that in order to run, whether it's a small or big business, you need to have some level of source of financing coming to you. And most of these operator or SMEs are very small and they do not have any credit history. For example, we're talking about rural workers, we're talking about the gig workers, we're talking about the operators who might even not have a bank account. They might be dealing everything in cash. So when they want to expand, now talking about Alain example, which he talked about moving into 4 figures and having more and more orders. When you want to go into the credit and you want to buy things on credit, you need to have some level of financing, some level of support coming from the banking sector. And we all know that how traditional bank will be very much restricted in providing those opportunities, because even in this age of digitization, only few weeks ago I was signing some account in the bank, and I remember at least 20-30 signature on a document, and you don't even have time to do that. First of all, second thing is all about the terms and condition, and we keep on talking about why you are doing it. And then there's a PDPA requirement in terms of the data, then in terms of the in the credit scoring, whether you have any bank account previously or not, and all sort of documentation. So when it comes down to looking into the avenue of easy financing, I will not say cheap financing, but I'll say easy financing. Digital banking can be one resource. Digital banking is going to be operating on a minimal cost because there will be digital bank. They will be operating from a cloud. You can bank from anywhere and everywhere in that sense. And the whole purpose of creating this initiative across the world is to bring into the financial inclusion. And when we talk about the inclusion, we talk about these underbanked or unbanked community which we have in the country. There's one report coming from the Bain and Company. Malaysia is home to 55% underbanked and unbanked community. So it's almost more than half of the population which are underbanked or unbanked. And if we tie up these community with the digital banking, which is supposed to increase. I'm not talking about digital bank to be a part of the profit-making institution here, but more about proposing the financial inclusion and providing the opportunities. So that it will become again a good avenue, a good resource for these SMEs to go and further expand their business activities, Freda.
Right. Okay. So I find it so interesting. Necessity becomes the mother of invention, right, Prof? And I maybe just want you to elaborate a little bit for people who don't understand underbanked and unbanked. Unbanked, I think people sort of understand, but underbanked, and of course, image of Professor Yunus of Grameen Bank, right? So Perhaps you can elaborate a little bit there.
Yeah, so if we look into, as you clearly mentioned, unbanked are people who have no banking services, but underbanked, that they might have some limited or restricted, everybody might have a saving account, for example, because people don't keep money, but they might not have any credit facility or any financing facility, for example. And the reason I mentioned to you earlier is all about embedded into, people like us. When we talk about finance, we talk about credit rating systems, right? And then we have to have a credit scoring system. And I think sometimes we are also culprit in inculcating those to our graduates and who are going to end up working in the bank. But again, going back to that you might have some facilities coming up with, and those are the things which are more needed by the banks for their own money, because you are looking into credit creation, and that's why everybody will be happy to provide you saving facility. You open up that, and bank uses your money to pull up the money and provide 10 times credit for the particular bank, for example. And that's how the money is created in the economy. But when it comes to looking into financing facility, every time you go and ask, they will ask you for collateral, for example. They will ask you for your credit history, for example. And they evaluate. Sometimes they can be very restrictive. Again, they also go by industry or sector. For example, if one time when the oil and gas sector was very much suppressed, there was some banks who were informed in fact not even approving any loan application coming from the people working in those sectors. So that become, you might have a challenges at a given point of time, but you should not be excluded from the services being offered by the bank. And Bank Nega always try to make sure that you can even complain if there is some type of discrimination coming from the bank, and that can fall within the unbanked sector. We need to make sure that this is the main thing. You should have innovative way of bringing the people who are unbanked or underbanked into the mainstream financial opportunities available to them. So I hope that makes clear, Freda.
Right. Thanks, Prof. Zinyi, so following the surge in e-commerce and digital payment, how can digital banking then help in complementing the range of financial services facilities available to MSMEs that are currently underserved, underbanked? So what kind of offerings can we expect from digital banks?
So I'm taking a leaf from also what Prof has just mentioned on credit assessments, and I think you're right, Prof, because to a certain extent it's also the way that credit has always been calculated, and we look at credit models in a specific way, right, from ages ago, and that's because of the way employment and work has always been organized. You have fixed pay slips, it is very consistent. It comes in, so people expect that. So things need to change. But just going back to your question, so technology and the change in consumer behavior has shaped how banking services can support the MSME growth. So with data and with speed to information, digital banking is definitely seen as a value contributor as businesses and consumer behavior have evolved, right? And it is more inclined towards obviously e-commerce and digital payments right now. So that just means that a lot of things can be done online, a lot of data can be gathered. So I'll just highlight on 3 things. There are a lot of things that digital banks can do. We've come up with many ideas, right? Especially in the last 2 years, you can see so many use cases and case studies where digital banks can really help drive the financial inclusion agenda. So I'll cover 3 areas. The first one that at the top of my head is really alternative credit data, and this is linked to what Prof has just mentioned, right? So the what we're looking here is where you're collecting new sources of information to assess credit and to take in a broader parameter, because just because you don't have a payslip in the last 2 months should not deter you from proving that if you had a job, you could pay, right? Just that in the last 3 months, you were, let go, right? So it's pretty fair. So if you talk about, but that is the nature of, how credit assessment has been done in the past.
Conventional.
Yes, because that was the source of information, right? That was the only available source. So right now we have a whole suite of things like what Alain has mentioned. He could tell you the entire cycle of what 2 of his MSMEs have gone through. So he will understand his customers really well, his vendors very well. So that kind of shows you about their not just credit worthiness, the financial responsibility that they have, right? And they understand. So that should add some value and weightage to that as well, right? So alternative credit data through advanced analytics definitely has enabled, and that will bring new ways of credit assessments. We really hope the digital banks will adopt this as much as possible. I'm sure they will. And the second one is on financial literacy. So I believe digital banks play a big role because with all the additional features, because of technology again, right? Speed and availability of technology. So financial literacy is a big thing. We talked about how lack of skills and knowledge really impacts the adoption of technology and obviously digital later on. So digital banks can put in things like obviously your analytics, right? Your prompts, educating people about how much of your savings should come should be put aside when you receive your salary. For example, prompt them for savings, right? Or to allocate more towards certain things. So those what I call as to encourage positive financial behaviors. So that contributes to financial literacy at the end of the day. And obviously, the main thing, I guess, is really speed and data. That's the biggest thing that I feel digital bank contribute. And these two would translate to things like quick onboarding process, quick decisioning process. So with all the alternative credit that you have and the alternative data that you have to facilitate credit decision making or any other analytics, the digital bank is able to offer more and better products and more suited products, I would say, right? More personalized, customized, relevant products to the customer. Not just giving them what banks can give and want to give, more like what do customers need, right? And you're able to provide that because you have speed and data to support you. I think these are the three things.
Okay, thanks, Zinyi. Prof, in an utopian world with affordable, accessible digital financial services available, what can we expect from the MSMEs?
Can you speak it again?
I said with affordable, accessible digital financial services available, what can we expect from MSMEs?
See, we have to look into from two perspectives. When we talk about digital banking, at one time, what we are doing that we are creating a more accessible and more cheaper version of financing being available to them. But at the same time, we are creating a competitive environment out there. What will happen when the digital banking will start operating? I hope there is no bankers in the panel, in the audience here. But when we start digital banking, and it will be because their capital requirements are going to be lower, and Malaysia, for example, starting with 5, for example, in next year, and then that will induce more to join the league, and we might be offering more and more licenses moving on. So it will also increase the competitiveness among the traditional banks, and then they have to also relook at the business model, for example. So in that sense, if you look into that, SMEs will be the consumers and SMEs will be the biggest beneficiary coming out of this whole evolution of digital banking, because not only they will be able to tap onto the innovative and more cheaper resources coming from digital banking, they will also be starting slowly to be included by the traditional banks because of the competitive environment. Because at the end of the day, people will have an option to switch between the traditional banks as well as to go into the digital bank. So it is not only to be looked into a standalone entity, but also to make the overall financial services environment bit competitive, which should be benefiting the consumers at large, including the businesses. And when we're talking about from this particular forum perspective, is SMEs. So it is going to be a double-edged advantage coming out of the evolution of digital banking. You can also have opportunity to look into the alternative financing resources, which can be cheap. At the same time, you can also go back and you can be now included into the traditional financial system, which you were earlier excluded, because nobody want to lose out the customers, and they might want to look into those who were not there. So it will be and that's the whole purpose. The governments, including every country which has opened the licenses, in Malaysia is a bit slow in doing that. It's still a few months to go until next year. The whole purpose is to bring into the people who have been marginalized, who have been excluded from this system, and then they will be going to get some type of support coming from there. Freda?
Right. Okay, thanks. Alain, right. So e-commerce, obviously your thing, but how can e-commerce then drive economic inclusion further?
Thanks, Freda. Great question. I want to just add on a little bit on the digital bank and how they help include people who are underserved and unserved into the digital economy. So echoing what Dr. Nafis and Sinyi has said, I think in our opinion, the way we like to look at it is that the digital banks actually supplement the existing conventional banking mechanism, because I think the current banking system, I think, works very well for people who have very formal documentation in the formal economy, and there's a big sector there. What the digital banking kind of opportunity does is to help kind of the underserved who maybe like what Dr. Nafi said, do not have formal documentation, lack of credit history, helps them with helps come up with very tailored products at say smaller ticket size loans, for example, which maybe is not palatable for the current conventional banks to offer because of certain cost structures and things like that. So it's very much complementary. That's our point of view. So it should help, and I think it will help enable local MSMEs further embrace digitalization and accelerate their business going forward. And then coming back to the question that you posed, how can e-commerce drive economic inclusion? I think first we need to understand. First thing that we need to understand is that the reality between offline and online is not so separated anymore. The ecosystem is you kind of have to work hand in hand with each other. At Shopee, what we believe is that in order to drive financial inclusion and enable the underbanked and unbanked as well as underserved to be more efficient economic contributors, we need to integrate all of these together, both offline and online. And I'll share a little bit as to how we are doing this. We basically look at a whole bunch of data trends, and what we do is we merge valuable insights for the benefit of the sellers through our suite of Shopee features and services. So for example, through our payment solutions, our deals near me product, Shopee Live, Shopee University classes on e-commerce, where what we can do is we're able to create tangible, sustainable impact on the Malaysian digital economy to help the micro SMEs and SMEs to pivot their business and achieve alternative sources of income and sustain livelihood. So to give a specific example, like this year, what we did was we onboarded Ramadan and Idul Fitri bazaars merchants to digitize their businesses via our mobile e-wallet, ShopeePay. Right. Similarly, what we've done is also we've recently sponsored push cards to B40 micro traders who were badly affected by the pandemic as part of our Shopee Gives Back initiative. And this was done in collaboration with various state governments, Terengganu, Perak, Penang, Sarawak, and the Federal Territory, as well as the Ministry of Domestic Trade and Consumer Affairs. And these offline traders, to give a bit of flavor, mainly sell food items, typically would not have credit card terminals to accept cashless transactions. And we know how important that is currently given the current pandemic. And this is also very much favored by mainstream consumers. This way of paying. So what we did was to enable the acceptance of cashless transactions via ShopeePay for these traders, as well as offer what we have specially curated offerings through our ShopeePay vouchers, which can be found via the Deals Near Me in-app portal on the Shopee app. So Deals Near Me is an online to offline feature, and this is fairly new. It uses location-based services to help users discover ShopeePay vouchers that can be used at nearby merchants. So including your bazaar stalls, cafes, restaurants, services. So therefore, what we can do is very tangibly direct traffic from online to offline to drive footfall targeted at these outlets.
Right.
So with these efforts, traders will be able to be part of the digital ecosystem. This is where we bridge the online and offline divide. In order to enable more financial inclusivity, the platform has also equipped with this new feature. It's called Quick Funds. And it enables Shopee sellers, so on the Shopee e-commerce platform. So the Shopee sellers to withdraw up to 80% of the escrow amount held in their account on the day that their product has been shipped out. So if you sell an item, what we have is Shopee guarantee that monies that the user or customer has paid is held in this Shopee guarantee, this escrow account, and will not be released until the customer has confirmed that they've accepted or received the goods. So sellers can withdraw up to 80% of this escrow amount to help with their working capital.
Right.
So we know that the more the seller sells, the more they stand to profit and the better off they are. But we also understand the ability to scale is often restricted by the seller's working capital. So now with the availability of such fintech solutions, such as Quick Funds, a small-time seller who may not qualify for personal loans from conventional banks, for example, may be able to roll their capital more efficiently, and therefore expanding their business.
Right. Just also to your earlier point about, O to O, right? It's not just online, offline to online, it's online to offline as well. I mean, O to O is to drive to help them as well. I want to come back to you, Professor. Now, if e-commerce is already driving financial inclusion from an economist perspective, would it make a difference if digital banking license is granted to e-commerce players, and why?
Again, it's a very tricky question because at the same time, you want to see what can be the aspiration for the digital banks and what can be the aspiration of the e-commerce player. When we're talking about integrating the services on one platform, for example, the e-commerce player themselves become digital banks, their focus might be lost there. We have a concept in fintech which we call it embedded finance, and we talk about when we are looking into embedded finance, we are looking into giving an opportunities to embed the financial services onto their platform. So even though, for example, for the likes of Shopee or Lazada, they don't want to go for digital banking license. I'm not saying they should not aim for it. They can aspire for it, but even if you don't want to go, they can always tie up with the digital banks to provide the similar services in order to help the SMEs. Now look into what can happen when these will collaborate. For example, we have, I understand we're talking more from digital banking, but if you look into the innovations happening in the fintech industry, for example, BNPL, buy now, pay later, for example, or we talk, and these innovations can be part of the digital banks, and including the traditional banks are already doing it. The e-commerce platform can tie up with the existing bank, whether they are traditional or whether they are going to upcoming digital banks, and can provide an opportunities to. End of the day, they need to make sure that the players on the platform have avenues to provide to the consumer who can pay via these channels. At the same time, the MSMEs can also have an opportunity to go through these platforms to look for some avenues for financing, right? So it is going to be a mix of that. If you look into all the people who have registered, the known ones, I understand there are around 29 to 30 people who have put their application, and Bank Negara has not clearly, and some people have come out in the market. I do not see anybody from the e-commerce side going into, Grab is eyeing for one of the licenses, working with the Singtel in Singapore. They already got it, and now they want to replicate here. If you look into that, Grab can again come loosely into the e-commerce type of platform. But if you look into the specific ones like Lazada or Shopee, for example, they have not shown the interest. So the focus is a bit different. It's more about collaboration between the e-commerce players and the digital banks in the form of the embedded finance, and providing them opportunities to look into that. That can be a good solution rather than the e-commerce platform themselves eyeing for that. But having said that, I can see there is an opportunity because the way financial services sectors are moving, it's all about innovation. It's all about creating opportunities for the existing players and also for the upcoming players. So there will be no surprises if using, because again, these e-commerce platform has a huge amount of customer base, right? And if they can leverage on their provider as well as the user of these platforms, it's a pot of gold out there, Alain. So if you anytime if you plan to start, do hire me as a consultant, and I can give you some more ideas about it, because there's a huge opportunity for e-commerce platform to leverage on the customer database they have, and they themselves can be one of the player. But I will see that they might lose the focus if you go into digital banking operation. It can be form of embedded finance, and they can partner with some of the digital banks to achieve the same aspiration rather than eyeing for that. And again, the regulatory aspect will again start looking into the overall business operation, which can get tricky at some point of time, looking at the e-commerce platform and looking at from digital banking perspective. So having said that, yeah, both possibilities can be available in the time to come. Freda?
All right. I want to ask you this question, though. You were saying that, digital banking, we're a bit late in the game compared to other places, right? So what will be the challenges facing digital banking licenses in the early stages from what, your observations from countries that have adopted it, and how should, we prepare for it?
Fintech is a world where people are joining the bandwagon. Some innovations are happening, and for example, I have to talk about buy now, pay later is one of the biggest craze at the moment, BNPL. The same goes with digital banking. So every country is offering that, and there are players who are eyeing this thing. So even though at the moment we only have looked into the regulatory requirement to apply for the license, we haven't even come up with the actual operation of these digital banks moving forward. So once the licenses will be given out, there will be further expectations coming from the regulators, Bank Negara, as well as from the users of this, and it will come with the experience, like what are the demand looking for from the consumer, what are the things they want from. They will be offering pretty much similar things compared to the traditional bank, maybe at a lower cost. But we should also look at the digital bank as an innovator rather than a replicator of what's already happening in the financial services sector. So a lot of things will evolve with that. If you look into the other countries, it's looking into how do we provide avenues, and how do we bring it to even, for example, you look into financing, for example, from the consumer perspective. At the same time, if you look from the investor perspective, how can you diversify your investment, which can be looked into the innovative financing solution, for example. So there can be a lot of innovation available within the digital banking, which will grow over the time. But at the moment, people are going for most of the common financial services coming from the banking sector, and that will remain the similar thing, apart from some innovative solutions coming up in the years to come. So there is a lot of space to watch out for the next couple of years within Malaysia as well.
All right, thanks, Professor. Zinyi, in your opinion, what are the prerequisites to a successful digital bank, especially in addressing MSMEs' pain points in getting financial facilities in terms of accessibility and availability?
Right. I think I'll go to 3 points, I guess. 3 is the magic number. Before I go into the 3 points, just to cover ground, right, that when we build a bank, it goes without saying that your fundamentals must be very strong, right? You're going to build an institution that is going to hold customer deposits, people's hard-earned savings, right, and hard-earned wages. The Bank Negara sees these as obviously deposit-taking institutions need to be very secure, very stable, and very well run. So risk management is key, technology is key. You got to get your cybersecurity all down padded. So goes without saying, right? All these are fundamentals that needs to be there and done very, very well. So I'll comment more on the business and the management front. And these 3 things are very important. Some of it also is coming from the experiences that we're seeing in other regions, and successful digital banks. What do they have, right? Firstly, one of the main things that I feel is quite underestimated sometimes is that the team that is running this digital bank needs to be very, it's not just experience and understanding of this segment and the objective of the digital bank. It should not be run like a conventional bank. There has to be some room for innovation, like you said, right? But it also has to be financially sustainable. That's also one of the very key things from Bank Negara. So you need a person or a team of people who are very balanced in technology as well as the business front, and have that logic of understanding who are my customer segments, what do we need to do, what can my technology provide, and how do I move about this, right? So obviously, the best situation is that you get people who are well balanced, right, in this perspective. That team is very crucial. We have seen digital banks which are run purely by technologists, and we have also seen digital banks which are purely run by ex-bankers, and they have their pitfalls, right? Strengths and pitfalls. That's why that often comes up. The second point I would say is that then that view and the objective that you have when you build a digital bank, it has to be sincere, right? You need to want that to have the will and effort to do more than just giving out products and credit. You really need to think about what do the customers need and how can they benefit. And it's really about knowing your customer segments. And also putting yourself in the shoes of the customers, walk the ground. In Malaysia, we always say turun padang, right? And to understand really what can solve the customer's needs. You can't just be sitting on your ivory tower and say, oh, we just give them this overdraft. I mean, or we just give them a credit card. Without really understanding what is the implication. Are you doing it responsibly? Is it going to help them? Will it bring them take them to the long run, right? To run the marathon rather than just, Yeah, so that's the second point. And the third thing would be, I would say, data. So if you notice all the digital banks which have been very successful, especially the ones in China and South Korea, right? Kakao, MyBank, WeBanks, like they are the ones who are seen as the successful digital banks. And one thing that they have is definitely data and the ability to serve because of the ability to analyze the data. Having the data is one thing. No point having it and sitting on it and not knowing what to do with it, right? So by using the data, then all the other factors that we talked about earlier, and Alain and Prof has also mentioned, you can really understand what is the sales cycle of your customer. Why aren't they purchasing over the weekend when their weekend sales is typically the highest and they have the most customers on the weekend, but they're not purchasing? So what's going on? Do I need to prompt them, see if they need some sort of a support? And the support that I give them could be a very short tenured financing product. It may not be a working capital loan that you repay after 6 months. No, that's not what they need. They need something to buy over in the next 1 week or 3 days. So then how will you know? You will only know if you have data. So data. I think that's one of the strengths, the biggest strengths that, and in a way prerequisites, I feel, that digital banks should have. Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna ask this question to everybody, and then we're gonna open the panel session for questions, right? Prof, so will digital banking make Malaysia's economy more inclusive and sustainable from the economist's point of view?
We can have a lot of wish list, and I understand Christmas is coming and we are talking about that. So yes, one of the initiatives to talk about digital banking is definitely to make it to increase the financial inclusion and make the financial system sustainable. But it cannot be done just by having digital bank. You need to also make sure that they are achieving that. When we talk about financial inclusion, I did mention earlier that we have half of the country, more than half of the population, which is unbanked or underbanked. And what are the reason for it? We need to look into that. Especially people like us who are most of the time within the Klang Valley, or we are only traveling to the major cities up north or down south, and we can go to any of the ATM and we can walk into any of the branches and we can do any financial services. So what are the challenges here? Which are the community we are looking at? We are looking at the rural community. We are looking here at the gig workers, those gig workers who do not even have a proper salary. They might be just getting in terms of the profit generated from the activities they're carrying out. They do not even have a proper contract, for example. They cannot further build up their activities into the gig economy, for example. So there need to be a strategy to exploit the digital banking to make sure they are able to achieve. We do not want a policy or an institution which is going to fall into the same traffic trap of profit generating activities. So it is not only, see, we all understand, and I keep on saying that, even though I have trained so many bankers in my life, but end of the day, when you become a banker and if you're running a bank, end of the day, it's all about profit generation and making sure that you are answering to your shareholders and you are able to generate money for them. So digital bank is not going to be the different, but it all to be driven by the regulators as well as the policy makers and the demand coming from the consumer group as well as from the SMEs group, for example, why they have been. So a lot of talking has been done, and your question is also in very much similar, that will be able to increase the inclusivity or make this sustainable. So it goes back to that, how do we demand? It also comes back to people like us to educate the SMEs or the people we're talking about, or even the digital bankers who will be operating, or the company, to demand an answer from them. Are they achieving the aspiration of it? So it's a multifold activity, the Freda, where everybody has to play a role. The policy maker make sure that they are able to fulfill the responsibility embodied on them. The digital bank themselves to make sure that they diversify their portfolio in the sense that they are catering to the underbanked or unbanked as a main priority, at the same time giving opportunities to the traditional people who are looking for financial services. And thirdly, we also look into the regulators. So there should be some level of regulatory guidelines which should tie up with the overall objective of the financial inclusion. Because when we talk from regulator perspective, we always look into meeting the capital requirement to make sure they are healthy and doing that. But end of the day, digital banking has another aspiration, which to increase that. So are they doing that? Is the certain percentage of the new account opening or new financing services are going towards the underbanked or unbanked or underprivileged community and society? So if there is no stick and cane to look after that particular aspiration, we will never be able to achieve. And maybe after a year, you're talking to me, Freda, talking about how much we have achieved, we might be disappointed in that sense.
Right.
So the message should go out, and if we are discussing on this forum or any other forum, the initiative is to make sure that the regulators, the policy makers, and the player themselves are able to fulfill what is going to do that. In a short, if you ask my question, the whole aspiration of digital banking is to make the financial services more inclusive, and they should be doing that. But how much we can achieve that, we can only look at the data once they have been operation, and we can revisit them in a couple of years to see that how much it has increased. And maybe after 2 years, if we're talking again, if we say that the Malaysian underbank has gone down to 40% or 45%, we will be able to see that something has come out of the digital banking aspiration. Thank you, Freda.
Right. Thank you. Jinyi, your thoughts?
Yes, my answer is a straight up yes. I definitely believe that if done well, our economies like ours will definitely benefit. And we should also think about it wider, right? It's not just bringing the underserved onto the platforms and to bring them onto digital financial services and digital banking. But I think a bigger picture can be painted in a sense that we are right in the middle, or well, kind of in the middle of the ASEAN map, right? So there is a lot that we can do in Malaysia, and we are being positioned as a potential regional hub in the coming years. So there are lots of opportunities for us to grow bigger, for our MSMEs and SMEs to grow regional and to be champions, right, in our respective fields and sectors. So definitely believe that it will be inclusive and sustainable, given the three prerequisites and the key things that can help to build the digital bank.
Right. And then, of course, sustainable and inclusive in the sense that, you're saying, looking beyond Malaysia, there are opportunities within the region and all that. Alain, your thoughts before I go into the Q&A.
Sure. I think I echo the same sentiment here. So digital bank will certainly help with the inclusiveness, especially with among the underserved, unserved demographic. Probably one of the things that we always talk about is when it comes to digital banking is on lending. But I think the other important thing to also remember also is that it can also help on the savings front, investment front. Digital banks can also play in this field, and as we know, with this, if we can reach out to more of these individuals who are potentially unserved in terms of from a savings perspective. It will certainly help them with better future planning, etc. So not just on the lending side, a more efficient use of capital, but also on savings. So I think that's quite important as well. That a lot of discussions may leave out. I think with digital banks, one of the key requisites for a digital bank is to have things seamless, easy to understand, very accessible. This will certainly help with improving the financial literacy in Malaysia. As we've seen, people take to online very, very seamlessly, very easily. They adopt very, very quickly. And this is another area, I think, that has quite a lot of indirect benefit to get the Malaysians, the underserved Malaysians, in terms of in terms of financial services, get them upskilled, get them to understand financial services a little bit better, and hopefully get them to save more efficiently, deploy their capital more efficiently, and just be more well versed in their decision making with financial related matters. I think that will certainly help.
Okay, thanks, Alain. So I'm going to address some of the questions from the audience. Here for Professor, what do you think will be the real adoption rate? How ready are the MSMEs to adopt digital banking?
It depends on how welcoming the digital banks are towards that SMEs, you know. So again, the adoption rate will going to be high in the sense because if the digital banks are going to operate under the scope which have been designed to look into a more innovative solution and more less rigid solution, which is going to welcome the SMEs community, it's going to be a more attractive toward the SME community, and we can only see that depending on when the product is good. So we are still looking for at least a year before we answer this question, because once the license will be given out, there will be, and I think those banks who are eyeing for those licenses, they already have some plans going on, but there will be only 5 successful out of 29 applications, for example. So some of them will be materialized, some of them will not materialize. So once you get the license, then they will start looking into those solutions. So the target market will definitely be the underbanked, and especially the SMEs will come into perspective, and there will be a lot of interest and lot of consideration coming from them. But the actual thing will depend on what are the solutions being offered and how flexible or how creative and how easy the documentation process is for them to start approaching and getting their financial services need to be done. But overall, if I just see, I predict something in that sense, I believe that it will be a more welcoming, and it will be a more positive response coming from the SMEs, and they can have a higher penetration rate once they start offering the solution.
Right. Here I've got a question here from for Alain from my colleague. It says Bank Negara has said it wanted to strengthen the regulatory arrangements for all consumer credits activities, including buy now, pay later schemes. So from Shopee's perspective, how has this impacted Shopee? What Shopee had introduced, and what has the take-up rate been since it was launched?
Thank you. Thanks for the question. I think it's still too early to comment on this matter. But as an e-commerce platform looking to drive financial inclusion, we will work closely with regulators on best practices. Thank you.
All right. Here, question to Zinyi is that you mentioned digital banks in other countries, and what are the lessons Malaysia's digital bank licensees could learn to enable a quick adoption? You know, of course, you talked about Korea and China.
Well, the successful digital banks, what we've seen would be, we've also mentioned earlier, right? One base, a very strong one base to start off with, an active one base, right? So it's one thing to have like 10 million customers, but how actively are you engaged with them? I think that's one of the main things. So converting that one base to digital bank customers is one of the things that we see more likely if you have active one base. So that's one of the main success factors. And I think it's also worth looking at those which may not have done so well, and some which have been bought over as well and exited. What are the lessons learned from those as well?
Right.
And we're seeing some different models where there were some banks where they went on a deposit taking spree, and what that literally means is that it becomes a lot of funding costs for the banks. So it's basically a mismatch of asset and liability, right? So you end up paying a lot for the deposits, but you're not generating sufficient lending income, so interest income. So obviously then, you have that mismatch and you run into losses. I think that's a very common pitfall. And also, but if you go on the model of a customer going all the way on customer acquisition and, funding all your customer acquisitions, because you don't have that strong one base, you do run the risk of cash flow issues because you cannot generate the income fast enough, but you're spending so much. Customer acquisition costs, whether it's from marketing and all these expenses, buying and rebates, giving out things, and also even deposit rates. If you're constantly dishing out high deposit rates to customers, at some point, again, comes back to the same old mindset of, not same old mindset, but rather the bread and butter of banking. Interest income, interest expense, right? How are you balancing that? And basically running a business, right? So that's where you need to think about sustainability. I think these are some of the key things that we need to consider.
All right. Okay, thanks. A question from Keith again from BFM. And this is to Prof, Professor and Zinyi, but I'll get Prof to answer this first. And there's also such a thing as over-regulation. Is Malaysia going in that direction? Your thoughts, Professor?
I'm a proponent of regulation, so most of my work is on regulatory aspect of within the financial services, and I always believe regulation is important, but it depends on the over regulation and ample regulation. We need to understand, what is regulation, why regulation is out there. Regulation is important to protect both the players as well as the consumer. Regulation role is not to stifle the innovation. Regulation should never stop innovation. So if you have regulatory policies which looks into, like, for example, again, I will be very honest to say that because somebody is asking question and I should be honest as a professor to answer that. If we look into Malaysian regulatory policy, sometimes those regulatory policy might not be conducive enough to attract investment and innovation within the country. If, for example, especially if I'm talking from the fintech space perspective, I can see that Malaysia is not able to attract more homegrown or investment from outside for the homegrown startups. One of the reasons is that the policy might not be clear or the regulation might not be clear. I will not say over-regulation, or I can even say lack of regulation or a lack of regulatory guidelines which help them to bring it to the country and say that we can invest and we can grow as well as the startups can grow within the country. But if you look from the consumer side, we need to also have regulation, because if we are not going to regulate innovation like crypto, for example, and if people start losing money like bulk, then we are going to have a challenge here. And especially when we're already dealing with the economic crisis, on overcoming with the pandemic, we do not want to have anything which is going to happen. Even, for example, BNPL, I consider BNPL is another debt trap out there. I'm sorry if anybody is a proponent of BNPL here, because again, if you are going to give easy money out and if you're going to create a debt trap, which can be a domino effect in the economy, if you do not regulate it properly, there will be opportunities where people will fall into the debt trap, and it can add pressure to the overall financial system. So regulation should be there. It should be meant to protect. It should be there to give ample opportunities to innovate. At the same time, provide an avenue for where the investors can come in. I think at the moment we do not have clear regulation, or we do not have conducive regulation which is trying to promote the overall fintech ecosystem. Malaysia needs to do a lot in that aspect. I won't say it's over regulation. It's not the conducive regulation in order to promote that thing. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Zinyi, your thoughts? Is there such a thing as over-regulation? Is Malaysia going in that direction?
It's kind of tricky here, right? Because I also recognize the need for regulation, mainly because we have seen banks that failed, and we have seen how Malaysia is very well cushioned even throughout the last 2 years. If you see how the banks have been running stress tests and trying to assess how our financial system is, we are stable, right? Our banks are showing good results in the sense that they are still able to support the economy during these times. And all this is because we have been regulated to extent to make sure that our financial system is stable and our customers are protected. So our customers are protected. So there is a need for regulation for sure, right? And if we extend that to fintechs and startups, the question really is, to what extent do the fintech and startups need to be regulated at the early stages, right? So if you talk about complexity or the extent of compliance, is there such a thing as initial levels of regulations and foundational, like the digital banking approach, right? Where you have a foundational level where the restrictions are, there are less restrictions, and then as you graduate and you grow, then you start to adopt more, safeguards, right?
Right.
And then as you grow, yes, you might potentially be taking on risk, and that's where you start to build up more safeguards, more risk management requirements and things like that. And that's probably a good thing to do because it's a step-by-step approach. And in the meantime, you have Bank Negara monitoring along the way, right? So that from a financial services point of view, I think this is a good approach. In other jurisdictions, certain digital banks also, certain regulations, for example, in Australia as well, they go on this foundational basis approach as well. And that helps to manage the risk level as well of the digital banks. So I think there is a need to look at regulations even for startups. It's just the extent of it. You don't need to go full scale as long as you're still able to monitor and manage the risk closely, right? So bite sizes, I think that's good. Whether there's such a thing as over-regulation, I suppose if you think about it from an innovation perspective, I think we're more concerned about whether you are so overly regulated that you cannot, so regulated that you cannot innovate. I think that is the concern, right? But you think about it, we have sandboxes, and I'm quite sure that our agencies and our regulators are moving towards opening up more sandboxes for people to test, people to run, and to test their proof of concepts and things like that. So these are safe environments where we as consumers will also be protected if a new product were to be launched. And I appreciate it as a customer, knowing that as a user, right, knowing that whatever that I'm going to use is safe to be consumed, literally, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a follow-on question, and I think and you've sort of answered it, but I think underlying it is also mindset. He says, are the existing policies facilitating key stakeholders to allow Malaysia-based SME to scale? Are the incumbent infrastructure, example PayNet, and mindset, aging board members, policymakers, facilitating for innovative business models to be initiated and eventually able to scale? And I know you talk about sandboxes, but you want to elaborate further?
In terms of cross-border, I believe PayNet earlier this month, PayNet and Bank Negara has shared with the public about Project Nexus, I believe. So these are cross-border payment initiatives that jurisdiction to jurisdiction level is being held, right? So I think we already launched the Malaysia-Thailand link, the mobile number, the transfers via mobile number will be available, I think, later this year, if I'm not mistaken. And next year, they will extend this cross-border payments via retail real-time payments to Singapore and Indonesia next year. So that's what I understand. Prof, you have something to add on this one?
Yeah, I like the comment coming from my good friend Encik Ridwan talking about the aging board members and talking about the policy. In academics, we always say that the more older you are, the more experienced you are. I'm not too sure about in terms of the innovation or in terms of the banking or the platform. Alain and Zinni might support me on that. But yes, we are looking for those innovation. We talk about, we have a lot of aspiration within this space. And I think one of the reasons why we are discussing today this topic is because of the aspiration we want to achieve out of a digital banking, right? But we also need to understand who are the driver of these. When you are offering a solution from particular these licensing holders and all, you also need to understand who are the people who are driving behind that, so they, I will be wrong to say, or I will be wrong to question the age, whether they are the board members will have some innovation or not. But I also understand that that particular age group is picking up with the technology and they understand, but at the same time it can be more like a interaction with the users, interaction with the millennials, interaction with the people who are going to use the services. So in fact, one way to look into is that all these players, whether they are digital banking license or startups, they should reach out looking at what are the aspirations, how do you want to do the services, or how you want to make it more favorable to them, rather than throwing out how do you want it to be done. Then again we are going into the same trap of offering solution which might not be attractive enough. So there can be a open consultation for, I will say, when the digital banking come into perspective, they should say that, what are the innovative things, or how do you want us to offer a solution, or what can be the expectation coming from SMEs or coming from the unbanked providers, and they should take those ideas to put into place, and not only being driven by their own aspiration of achieving certain level of it. So I heard you, Anchik Idwan, and I share the same sentiment. I hope you don't have similar question for older academics.
Can I just add on to that? In my course of work in the last few years in Fintech and in innovation in financial services, a lot of things are actually driven by the aging population. They are the ones who have been there, done that, and they have seen a lot. The ideas might be coming from the younger generation, but the support is there by the older and experienced people, right? Because over time, I think everybody does understand that times are changing and they can see the difference, right? So, I don't think the mindset change. I beg to differ, because I am in this area of financial services where I am seeing this. There could be other industries where it might be different. So maybe I should just refrain from.
I think I also should refrain from saying some things. But anyway, there's a question here for Alain. He says, besides lacking accessibility to financial facilities, have you identified any other pain points experienced by MSMEs selling on e-commerce platforms? What do they need to sustain their growth moving forward? I know, Alain, you're talking about the Shopee University, blah, 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 and all that. Anything, what other pain points do they have, Alain?
Yeah, I think great question. So let me share a little bit. So there was recently a report that came out, the Asian Digital Generation Report 2021 by the World Economic Forum in collaboration with C Limited, where close to 86,000 people across 6 ASEAN countries, including Malaysia, were surveyed. And the respondents were predominantly from the youth segments, about 77%, defined between ages of 16 to 35. Some 56% respondents were women, while the remaining 10% business owners. Among the findings that they found, there was a high demand for further digitalization of finance among the MSMEs. Right. Some 66%, I think, of respondents identified payments as a key area for further digitalization, while 43% wanted to go further in terms of digitalization of loans and financing processes. So these are two very big areas that they've identified. The same report also highlighted that MSME owners in particular attach very, very high importance to digitalizing finance, with 75% wanting more digital payments and over half wanting greater digitalization in lending. The respondents also found that increased ease and efficiency of payments and transferring money to be a very significant benefit of digitalization to the society. And then also weighing on the demand of digital banking from MSME owners and how online businesses are more resilient during the pandemic. What we can conclude is that the digital bank must not only be able to facilitate fast and convenient digital financing, but also consists of the right ecosystem to help the resiliency of these businesses through the process of digitalization. in a more local context, the ability of the digital banks ecosystem in accelerating MSME digitalization is even more significant. As Malaysia is at 60%, is a second country only behind Philippines, to place a very, very great importance on digitalization post pandemic recovery.
Okay. Probably I'd like to know, maybe we'll close off today's session and your concluding thoughts from everybody. I'll start with Zinni because I know Zinni always has 3 points. Your to conclude today's session.
Thank you, Freda. So I'll have to think about 3 points right now.
No, it's up to you. It's up to you.
Firstly, I think Malaysia is definitely will benefit from the digital banking service offerings. I strongly believe that with the technology and the understanding of what customers' insights are important, the pivot in how we deliver financial services is going to change, and MSMEs will definitely benefit from this. Second key point is that we're not just talking about bringing MSMEs into the financial system and talking about financial inclusion to them. We're talking about helping them to grow. Right. So when we talk about digital banking offering services to MSMEs, what you will likely see or MSMEs can benefit from is not just about the solutions, the financial products. It's about the peripherals that come with it, helping them understand what it means. How can a financial product actually help to improve your business? When do you ask for it? When do you go to the digital bank or press that button, right? And how do you build financial literacy? So these two really address the two MSMEs coming in, the financial inclusion for MSMEs point. And I guess the third one would be that in order for all this to happen, definitely infrastructure regulations play a role. Infrastructure, we talk about how we have the 5G network coming on. It's not just for us to watch. I think people know this, right? It's not for you to just watch Netflix. It's for businesses to operate, digital banks to operate very efficiently, all the infrastructure for manufacturing, for all types of businesses to run, right? So that's the key thing, right? Infrastructure needs to be in place, and I really hope we see this to fruition. Whether it's 5G network, whether it's a cloud infrastructure, that we have the right providers to be in Malaysia to support the growth of financial services into the digital arena, and correspondingly to drive financial inclusion. So these are the 3 things.
Okay.
I found 3.
That's testing you. Professor?
Since Zinni has talked 3 points, I think it's 1 point for each of the panelists. So I think she has covered, but I just want to compliment what Zinni said. I was reading the digital banking license framework by Bank Negara, and one of the very clear things mentioned there was to look into the business plan, because we don't have the service plan after they get the license, but business plans once they apply for a license is to meet the objective of the financial inclusion, and the performance indicator of these digital banks should be aligned with that. So I hope and I wish that the whole aspiration of this digital banking ecosystem in Malaysia is there to help to increase that financial inclusivity within the country. And even though any type of pandemic is going to affect the country in the future, we should be prepared enough with these innovation in place where to support the underbanked or underprivileged community by way of these digital banking should be the way forward. I can also add one more point. I don't think of 3 points, but second point which I can think of is to increase the digital financial literacy. Everyone talks about fintech, everyone talks about blockchain, everybody talks about cryptocurrency, but I can tell you, if you go and ask them to explain in layman term of they understand what is the basic of these digital finance aspiration, many people will fail to do that. So when we are at one side of the spectrum, when we are looking into creating an ecosystem for fintech or digital finance within or digital banking within the country, at the same time there should be an aspiration to to make it awareness, increase the awareness among the user, including the SMEs, including the rural communities, how they can leverage on it. Everybody know how to operate a smartphone, but you don't know how to use smartphone to do your financial activity or how to look for those things. So that will be the second push which the government should do, is to increase the awareness and increase the digital financial literacy in the community. And I wish all the best to Malaysians for doing that. Thank you.
Thanks, Professor. Alain?
Sure, thanks. So I'll approach this from a MSME angle. So I think overall, digibank will be certainly helpful to improve accessibility, financial literacy, having greater speed and enhance products or tailored products for the underserved and unserved community. I'm hopeful for the MSME sector going forward. So I think the government has announced a fair number of programs going forward. I think they've allocated assistance of up to 30 billion ringgit in grants going forward. And we're working very closely with the government to onboard more and more MSMEs onto the Shopee ecosystem. And we'll continue to empower and enable these local MSMEs to pivot their businesses online or venture into the digital realm. And so we can kind of leverage our technology. We improve our features and services, and we can merge insights and data. We can definitely empower these businesses and help them digitalize even further. Now with the ecosystem that they're on, imagine the possibilities these businesses can achieve going forward. We hope that they can achieve and create an improved and sustainable livelihood for themselves, and also those within their local communities going forward with access to digital technologies and fintech solutions going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Alain. And, thank you, everyone. Of course, Yeoh from KPMG, Alain from ShopeePay Malaysia, and Professor Dr. Nafis Alam from Monash University, University of Cambridge. Very interesting insights that you've given us. It'd be interesting to see what's going to happen with digital banking, how things are going to be panning out, over regulation to regulation. We watch that. But I think also an important factor to consider, as it is, financial literacy and then digital financial literacy. That's something that MSMEs have to take onus and ownership of on this journey, right, as we move forward, and not just to play in Malaysia, but also in the region and hopefully the world. So with that, thank you again to all the panelists. Thank you, WIEF, and I pass the stage back to the MC.
Thank you to our distinguished guests for being here today and making this webinar successful. Now, thank you to all. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today, and we truly hope that you have gained valuable inputs and ideas. Now, on behalf of WIEF Foundation, thank you for joining us today. Stay safe and have a great day ahead.